That's fine. A little shuffle ball change.
Yeah.
Alright, right when he sits down, just start rapid fire.
Alright. Cool.
Matt Sullivan.
Program director.
Please tell us name, phase. Can you help me?
Name, phase, pronouns, and how you doing?
Name, phase, pronouns, and how you're doing.
Sure thing. Matt Sullivan, program director, he, him, his, Sagittarius, Scorpio rising, and I'm doing well. Ironically, the phases go not A-I-M, they go I-A-M, and then M and E, so it makes I am me. But the idea is the confluence of what it is you're trying to do and what it is you're actually doing, and then how does it make you feel.
And how does that hang out with phases?
How does it hang out with phases? That is an awesome question. So I think about each phase having its own kind of spirit, like its own little joie de vivre, right? So intentions is not about making commitments to stuff. It's about trying stuff. It's about proof by negation. So when I think about what makes a really successful intentions phase, I think about waking up on time, going to bed on time. I think about learning a language. I think about finding tribe. I don't necessarily think about getting into school or finding a job right away, right? Because I'm trying to focus on how do I lay a foundation of skills. So a lot of it is how do I emotionally regulate? How do I manage my time? And then what is it that I want to do? So it's really slowing down and taking the time to figure out what that future could look like, as opposed to just trying to get it done really quick. That's really hard for people, especially coming out of whether it's wilderness or wherever they were before. There's a lot of momentum and desire to kind of just get things done. And we really want to take that opportunity to slow down for a little bit and go back to core principles. What's important to me, what's important to my family, how do I want to show up in the world? Because otherwise we can start to get mission drift, which happens a lot, I think, at the transitional level. People start off doing something, end up doing something totally different. And we're really trying to avoid that, right? We're trying to create 3 distinct chapters of life that we can then use kind of as an iterative process. At Made Life, we talk about design thinking. We really try to borrow from that. We try to come up with different ways that we can prototype and isolate some variables so that we're not trying to change everything all at once. And that takes time to figure out what that means from a wellness and recovery perspective. Once you're through intentions phase, ideally at that point, one of the ways that we know that you're done is you can be consistent, you can be reliable, you're accountable to your word and to your calendar. We also have like a set of skills that you can rely upon when stuff gets really, really hard. And we anticipate that as you go through actions and merge, it's going to get really hard because you're going to be doing things out in the world. Actions takes a different flavor to it in the sense that it's your first draft of what you want your life to look like. So you're starting to pull off the AIM House program and starting to put in your own program at AIM House. And that requires you getting out into the world and either making a commitment to getting a job, being in school, volunteering, doing some community service, getting an internship, doing something creative down at Made Life. But you're starting to put stuff into your schedule to be able to stress test a little bit. So you're gonna be doing a half program, half whatever it is that you wanna do in your life, but it requires you to make some decisions. And this is the part of the program that I think is the hardest because it's the grind. Right? This is the part of the program where you're doing the things you're supposed to be doing for a long period of time, and it starts to lose a little bit of its shine. And that's when we really start to learn something about ourselves, right? Like we can white knuckle our way through a pretty good chunk of time, but once we start doing things for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, that's when we really see where we get stuck and where we have struggles. And as a mentor, that's like the juicy part, is when we start seeing people get a little bit stuck, because then we get to do some work. Ideally throughout that process, it's again, figuring out what works and what doesn't, right? Most people start off with a really big plan and then move to a little bit of a smaller one and keep kind of honing down until we get to that last stage, which is merge. Merge is about what does the rest of my kind of next step look like. So this is when we start talking about where you want to live and a budget for living and what your kind of longer term academic and vocational goals are. That's the stuff people want to talk about on intentions and actions, and we really intentionally hold it back for merge phase so that there's room to learn something about ourselves and to let that breathe. It also allows time for people to develop those rhythms and habits and have them be meaningful, right? It's a big difference between doing something for 2 months versus doing it for 3 or 4. But once we get into that last phase, you're kind of in the airlock, right? Like you're not really in program, you're not really out in the world yet, you're right in that in-between space. And it requires a ton of advocacy, communication, negotiation, which is a different skill set than just trying to make it day by day. But ideally, when you graduate from the program, you can look at the plan that you made for merge And that's a pretty good blueprint for what you want your life to look like moving forward, at least in the short term. And it's something you can come back to when life inevitably gets hard, because it's all surplus, right? You can say, okay, this worked, and I know this worked. Now this moment of time where something went right, and you can always come back to that as a memory. So that's the way I kind of understand the 3.